delivering, what you saw in the video was earlier, and so they designed a wire carrier that would take 7 10-liter jerry cans, and in the beginning we just bought jerry cans from the market, which were not that good. Then Jacob's firm designed that space age looking jerry can. Man, that's really seen as a hot ticket. So Jacob's firm does most of the design.
I'm kind of asking and thinking about, still, but like, do you feel like they have all the skills that they could have to design the next best water filters?
I didn't realize that I was engaged in design until I met Cheryl and a couple of other people at an Aspen Design Summit. I was just doing creative problem solving. But then they said that's design. And I think design is oversold. The mystique of design is oversold. I've come up with a lot of the concepts. Low-cost drip irrigation was my concept. And then the process involved a bunch of people who were really experts in irrigation and mathematics of water flow and so on. But I could look at your stove and come up with ways of cutting it in half within half an hour.
Sounds like it's real.
Yeah.
Tomato watch. With around,
So this is all, I've written some of this stuff up. You take the key contributors to cost of any technology, and you design around those key contributors to cost, looking for trade-offs that are acceptable to the customers that are using the product. So in drip irrigation, we cut the cost by to a fifth. Now, one of the characteristics of drip irrigation is uniformity of flow from each emitter. But in reality, the high-tech drip systems have 95% in the lab, but if they're not back filtered and backwashed and all that stuff, they go down to 30%. But a well-maintained one is maybe 90%. Well, when you use microtubes instead, maybe you get an 80% uniformity. But the farmer before that has been using flooding, and that's about a 20% uniformity. So 20% to 80% is fantastic. And they don't give a shit about going from theoretically 95 to 80. You see what I mean? And not only that, but the big problem in a small plot is that the holes where the water comes out plug. And if you have a high-tech emitter, it plugs faster and you can't unplug it. If you have a hole, you can flick it with your finger. So you give up the uniformity, but it doesn't plug as much. And when you're doing a drip system for this room, if you're doing a drip system for 10 acres, you need a lot of pressure because the pressure at the end of a tube ought to be at the same as at the beginning, otherwise you're going to get different flow rates. If you've got pipes that are only 10 meters long or 20 meters long, you can put a tank on this table and it'll give you enough pressure to give you uniformity through the line, so you can cut the wall thickness of your tubing to make it a thin sleeve. And the biggest contributor to cost is the weight of most products. See what I mean? So you can't use that lateral line for a 10-acre field, but so you look for those trade-offs. It's the same with stoves or anything.
With some variations, for me to reach this target, I'm looking maybe an investment of $10 million in just R&D for technology. There is big, to do, just in case of, there is different problems. Like for the stoves, I would love to hire the best ceramist who's now working for, and I don't know what industry. So I think in a lot of our problems, the technology is very difficult, and a lot of time, people are trying to solve the problem. They don't have, they have a lot of good intentions, they have good skills to design, but
what I'm doing now on the design thing is putting together a team of the people that I consider to be the best in the world for each problem. But that doesn't necessarily cost money. Some of these people are intrigued. So we're working on cutting the functional cost of village photovoltaics by at least 40%. I've got a couple of people that have built big solar systems in Arizona. The first application is pumping, so I've got Jack Keller, who's the top irrigation guy in the world. So we make a sort of a virtual team by phone. Eventually, we'll send that team to the pilot test site to lay down the design parameters. Then a leader, an engineer from Idiom Design will be in charge of building the prototype. You see what I mean? So you don't necessarily have to pay 10 million.
I mean, we do the best we can with what we can get for free. But my my big struggle is that very often people say, like when you want to make a cell phone, you get really serious about investing in the R&D. But nobody wants to put the money needed to do R&D for product for poor people. And whatever, like we reach, like in our case, whatever impact we reached today, with maybe just $100,000 in investment in R&D would have maybe multiplied by 5. So that's one of my challenges when I'm talking to people in the market.
It's tough to get money for R&D. How are we doing on time?
It's 11:20, we have another 5 minutes.
I have one small question on the holding company and the subsidiary. When you go to a different country, I mean, the reason for setting up a holding company is that you're free to then set up, follow the Tata Sons pattern. But who are the local shareholders then, the subsidiary?
You asked a question. So Jacob has a piece of the company right off the bat. We set aside 10% of the shares of Spring Health for equity for staff. We set aside another 10% to put in the form of a foundation that would benefit our partner Kirana shopkeepers.
What does it do for the Kirana?
We're working that out. Shareholding is probably not that valuable for them. I mean, it isn't valued for them. But we might provide cash prizes for certain things, or pay for somebody being sick, or something like that.
But do you think it's an important element for the local partner to buy and giving them shareholding, stakeholding in the venture?
Yeah.
Is it a motivating factor?
Yeah, I think so. Shopkeepers, Kirana shopkeepers are different than staff, but any decent company has an ESOP for share ownership by employees. And it's controversial how much, but I believe that it's important. And key staff, the CEO usually gets I think it's a motivating factor. Again, I don't have any answers, but that's how we've come down.
But the local staff really doesn't have any skin in the game, so it's...
Local staff have
that's
skin.
yeah.
Okay, we're doing a major blitz now for water melas because we need to increase the participating families. We have divided the staff into 4 water mela teams. One of them are the Tigers and so on. The team that each week ends up with the most customers that stick as a result of the water melas gets 1,000 rupees. So we have a whole performance bonus system built into the local staff structure.
Have you thought about ways in which you can increase your kind of customer acquisition from the 50% to like an 80% or something like that?
I don't think we'll ever get to 80%, but I don't know, maybe we'll come up with, there's ways, Water Health International has done entertainments, and then they show bacteria through a projection microscope Jacob has developed a very low-cost version of the projection microscope for, I think, $40. So we might try out stuff like that. I don't know.
It's
I
not
think
something you would actively be looking at this
most
stage.
marketing things, 50% is damn good in my experience. But you have some ideas about how you could get?
I was just you've already done all of the kind of the infrastructure and kind of the setup costs to offer the product in that village. The next stage would seem to be kind of to maximise the number of customers you can get
Sure.
in that village.
Well, there are two things. I haven't given you all the details. In the beginning, average household consumption was 2.6 liters a day. It is now 6.3 liters a day. So part of it is getting consumption up. Part of that has to do with details again. The standard 10-liter jerry can is tough for a child to tilt over to fill a glass. We found that if you put a tap, consumption goes up. It's just a whole lot of details.
Because the tap leaks.
Yeah, we designed it.
I will never buy anything from you.
So
You get the bag,
I mean, the smallest economic viable size of village, 100 households. 50
No,
households.
we figure 400 households within 2 to 3 kilometers.
400 households. Okay.
That's our experience. Because you got to sell 1,000 liters.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have market penetration of,
10%.
yeah, that's 120, you know. So yeah.
Paul, what's your perspective on having markets where you're creating a need, like for example water, they got it for free and now it costs something, versus markets in which you're substituting a service in which they're already investing part of their income? That is the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, what's your perspective on a business model which sells one solution, so you have one contact with the client, versus a continual revenue model with that client, like for example keep on selling him water rather than a filter that he can have at home. So
I don't think there's any single answer to those questions, but I've been involved a lot in the process of designing affordable technology and services. I believe that to make money, there's usually, as a rule of thumb, there's more money in selling a service that the technology makes possible than selling the technology. So I don't think there's much of a global profitable business in selling affordable electrochlorinators. But an electrochlorinator allows you to sell water to a large number of people and make money doing that. And I like the repeat customer thing. So when we're making partnerships, see, I think one of the answers to last mile distribution, so-called, I call it last 500 feet, is partnering with enterprises that already exist. So we were talking about aggregators, but there are already aggregate dealers that could be a natural. So there's now the reverse of last mile distribution. People don't talk about that as much. Is last mile collection. So if you look at biomass, one of you is involved in biomass, but there are 4 billion tons of agricultural waste produced every year. Some of that is not accessible, some of that is not usable, but much of that is convertible into green energy. The biggest single problem of making that available as a substitute for carbon emitting fuels like coal is that the agricultural waste and invasive plant species in a lot of countries are scattered. If you start collecting cotton stalks are bulky and very low value, and like shipping water, shipping cotton stalks will kill you. The transport costs kill you. So if you transport the collection radius, just like shortening the last mile or last 500-foot distribution radius, you can make it work. So we're designing a biomass processing plant with a 4-kilometer collection radius. The breakthrough in design is not the technology for converting to biomass, it's the 4-kilometer collection radius. Because that makes it affordable to collect and put something of value when it's bulky. Add value to it, and then you can transport it. You see what I mean? So that, and I think that the global trend is to, people talk about distributed energy, but the future is not with wires, just as if quickly what's happening is not using wires with phones. It's being taken over by wireless. I think battery replacement will replace wires.
Here you sell, the retailer sells water for 5 cents a liter. How much of that comes back to Spectrum?
Now, wait a minute, you said 5 cents a liter. It's actually 4 cents for 10 liters.
Oh, sorry, 4 cents for 10 liters.
Yeah.
How much of that is retailed by the Kirana shopkeeper? How much of that comes back?
Our split with the Kirana shopkeeper is for the first 1,000 liters, he keeps 25%, we get 75%. The next 1,000 liters, it's 50-50, and the next 1,000 liters, it's 75-25 in his or her favor.
And this is monitored by the chlorine that you put out. How do you make sales?
That's another whole thing. The chief operating officer has set up a cell phone data system that keeps data on a daily basis. And when our business associates visit the shop, and we'll eventually have technology that sits in the tank, because when you get to 10,000 partners, you're going to get, we've made it clear, if somebody cheats and sells bad water, they're out. We own all the equipment, by the way.
The tank and everything.
Yeah. But we'll have sensing equipment, and again, it's a question of affordability. You could design equipment. One, Sarvahal is a company that's designed. Sarvajal, yeah, they designed. They're met with him 10 days ago. Good guy, but they've become almost a software company rather than a water company. So they've designed this equipment, but it's too damn expensive. So that would give you continuous monitoring of water in the tank and so on. We've asked them to see if they can design a low-cost version of that so that we could use it, but I'm doubtful that they can, but they're going to give it a shot. But there are simple technologies that we'll put in a tank so it can tell us if there is a sudden influx of water in a tank. It'll make a record. Rather than shipping it by sort of a cell phone mechanism, when our business associate comes, he'll take a reading. And if somebody has a big influx of water, well, we know when the tank is serviced, and we know that there's about a 10% loss of water and so on. So we keep pretty tight tabs, but that's when we've got 25 partners. When we've got 10,000 partners, it's going to be more challenging.
Income leakage in your tank.
We haven't had any problem with income leakage at this point. Basically, say what you mean by income leakage. collects money, but he doesn't,
Report it back. He sells 3,000 liters and he reports 1,000 liters.
yeah, but you know, when our people chlorinate the tank when it's empty. So they've got a pretty good idea of,
What it is.
yeah. And if they're coming out to fill a tank, that means he sold 3,000 liters, and you can pretty much say there'll be 300 liters wasted. So now, the only way that then he can sell
Yeah, to
water
collect the
is,
cash from the shopkeeper.
oh yeah, we keep very tight financial controls, and it's a cash basis. So we collect every few days from the shopkeeper,
How do you collect?
cash.
Yeah.
Cash. Take money.
Our business associate,
So that's not like
huh?
mobile money or anything.
Yeah.
Somebody goes around and collects the cash from
The
merchants.
same business associate that fills the tank collects the cash.
I understand you've been receiving good support from the government recently, since they want you to implement it in another country. But have you had any political resistance while you were launching,
We haven't done this through the government at all. It's a private company.
or you just came and implemented?
Well, I didn't come. All of our staff are Indian.
Okay, but
I come regularly, so this is a big place.
you came with the notion that we could provide water in this way, and you just implemented it without any.
Yeah, private business.
Yeah.
So you don't consult any village leader?
Yes,
No, we consult village leaders. They recommend which shopkeeper we deal with.
Part of
No,
the
no
research.
No government intervention? Or interest?
No, it's a private company. But this is something that we're worried about. At some point, you know, in India, there's a movement of private schools, and when it got to be big enough, the government is
That's
taking
right.
steps to shut them down.
Uh-huh.
So we're thinking about that as a risk. Part of the risk is that the government intervention in water is likely to be at a state level. So we are going to a second state earlier than we normally would. See, we're in Orissa now. Within 6 months, we'll move to part of Bihar. So we'll add a state every year.
How do you plan on mitigating that risk?
By going to different states, by having some political connections. We're working on that now.
Or are you working on it?
Well, because that is a risk. Somebody will, we're not really challenging, we're not big enough and successful enough to be a challenge. What we did as IDE is we went low profile. And by the time somebody was ready to challenge us, we were big enough to be able to handle it. But we're not making big noises about it. We're just doing the stuff.
But you're doing a lot of marketing.
Yeah, and people know about it, and they don't seem to object to it. But we get a lot of support from the villages too. It's important for them.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, I mean, they believe it's important, not just. Are we ready to wrap it up soon, or?
Sorry, I still go through the company.
Yes.
So you employ staff. You own staff as in the guys that go around and do the water tests. You own
They generate the chlorine, they do the water tests. We also do random E. coli tests in the homes.
Okay,
And they do all that, we've trained them to do
the
that.
services. Then you own the technology
Yes,
and the merchants are in effect your partners.
yes.
Okay. So the customers that are buying the water are the end consumers.
Yes. And the Krana shopkeepers sell the water.
Yeah.
They're the local sales point, not us.
And then your staff goes around and collects the money every 3 days.
Our piece of the money and the shopkeeper.
Keep their share.
To put it in context, when the Kirana shop sells Coke or Pepsi, they get a 10% commission.